Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has secured another win for the province with the announcement that the Pathways project has been approved to go ahead. To chat about this and other national issues is political commentator with the Toronto Sun and BCN contributor Brian Lilley. Brian, welcome back. Great to have you once again.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so Brian, this project announcement comes after 2 oil pipelines were announced and AI a data center announcement. So Brian, you aren't a fan of Pathways, but you are still calling this a win for the Premier. Why?
Well, because I think Pathways is unnecessary in terms of being able to build pipelines, except for the fact that the Prime Minister has said it's necessary. So the province and the industry shouldn't have to put up with this, saying, oh, we'll spend $30 billion to bury carbon in the ground, as kind of an offset for building the pipeline. I think most of the world has moved on from that. But Premier Smith is willing to go along with it. I've spoken to her. I've spoken to top people in her office, people in the industry, and they all say, look, if this is the price of doing business, then it's the price of doing business, but at least we're getting to do business. And so, Premier Smith, 3 big wins in a week. The pipeline route to the West Coast unveiled. Sure, southern route, not as good as northern, but it's a win. That is good news. And it's going to go forward. I interviewed Brett Wilson for my Full Comment podcast that came out earlier this week. He's a guy who knows his way around investing, knows his way around big projects. He says this thing is going to go forward. The pipe dream one, Ontario's potential pipeline route from Hardisty all the way to Sarnia. Okay, that one is a bit less likely to happen, but they're going ahead with a feasibility study and they're looking at it as national security because right now, Line 5, the Americans always threaten to shut it down. And then that $13 billion data center, that couldn't have happened without the MOU last November. And some people still say the MOU is not worth anything. The MOU is awful. It doesn't mean anything. The MOU got rid of the clean electricity regulations, which is what allowed that 13 billion AI data center to go forward. Because to ensure that this data center isn't going to hurt the grid, they're building their own power plant. That couldn't have happened without the clean electricity regulations going by the wayside as a result of the MOU. Pathways, part of that same MOU. It shouldn't have to happen, but it's Premier Smith doing what she needs to do to move her province forward. So kudos.
Yeah, Premier Smith's certainly been busy lately for sure. And while she was celebrating that $13 billion data center announcement last week, others were, of course, criticizing it. Conservative MP Leslyn Lewis came out critical before facing backlash in her own party. So what's the controversy surrounding that data center?
There is a weird moral panic going on about data centers in North America right now. New York State just is about to pass a law saying data centers not welcome here. And I get it. There are concerns that it will suck all the electricity out of the grid and we don't have enough. Well, that's why in the one that's going up in Sturgeon County in Alberta, they're building their own power plant. There's concern that it will suck up a lot of water in order to cool it. Well, Meta showed how they're going to do it using minimal water in a closed loop system. They're going to continually reuse the water. It's a minimal water intake. There have been some bad data center projects. Absolutely. Water tables have been affected. Grids have been affected. This one, they knew about those problems. They looked at them. But Leslyn Lewis coming out against it, and then Michelle Rempel Garner, the Calgary Nose Hill MP, also a conservative, saying, no, this is good. And then Leslyn Lewis backtracked and said, no, I'm excited for Alberta's win, but we have concerns. She obviously didn't look at the announcement. But there is a portion of the political right, on the far end of the political right and on the far end of the political left, that have decided data centers are evil and they don't create jobs and they cost a lot. Well, I asked Premier Smith about that last Thursday. And I said, one of the complaints I hear from politicians is I'm not really interested in a data center because it doesn't create very many jobs. The one in Sturgeon County is going to create thousands of construction jobs, about 300 jobs going forward, but it's going to generate millions upon millions of dollars per year for the province. And that's why she said it's worth it. They've answered all the other conditions. So a lot of concern, a lot of Luddite type behavior from people on all sides of the political spectrum when it comes to data centers.
Okay, switching gears here. Brian, a welfare tribunal in Ontario has ruled that illegal immigrants can collect welfare payments. And this is a ruling that, Brian, you say is a warning for Alberta and the rest of the country. Why do you say that?
Well, so this involved a man who came to Canada on a work permit in 1997. When the work permit expired, he never left and he kept working under the table. So he's in the country illegally. He's been working illegally, not paying taxes. And now he wants taxpayer funded welfare payments. The administrators of this provincial welfare program said, no, you have no legal status in the country. And the tribunal heard his case, paid for, by the way, by a legal aid clinic that's a bunch of activists that take money from the taxpayer to argue for more taxpayer money going out. Just an odd aside there. Well, this ruling could end up impacting how future illegal immigrants are going to happen. Remember, we've had millions of people come in over the past couple of years on temporary work permits, temporary study permits. And as the aforementioned Conservative MP and immigration critic Michelle Rempel-Garner has pointed out, there are millions of people whose permits are expired or about to expire, and the government has no plan to make sure that they leave the country. So we're going to have millions of people. And so, yeah, this time it happened in Ontario, in Southern Ontario. It could be happening in Southern Alberta next. And believe it or not, these tribunals and these adjudicators point to these sorts of things and say, oh, well, in this jurisdiction, they did this. In this jurisdiction, they did that. I'm worried that we're going to head down the same path that the United States did, where they conflate legal and illegal immigration, where they have battles over this, where they start opening up services to people who have no business being in the country. They have no legal standing in the country. This tribunal ruling will do that. Thankfully, the Ford government here in Ontario, it's a regulatory change. They say they're going to make the regulatory change. My reading of the current regulations is the guy still wasn't eligible for welfare, but the tribunal decided to politicize it. And we could see that happen across the country.
Brian, while we have a data center opening up in Alberta, a new report on the state of manufacturing is showing a significant number of companies in Canada are moving production south. So kind of the opposite. So you say this is proof that Carney should have been doing more to get a deal for Canada.
Well, the reason that these companies say they are or are thinking of moving production south of the border is uncertainty. You know, sure, CUSMA was extended for the remaining 10 years, but that's it. And we have annual reviews, which means uncertainty. So businesses aren't sure they will have the access they need, unfettered access without extra tariffs on. Okay, if they have the option of moving some or all of their production south of the border, many of them have done it. So 42% of the manufacturers that KPMG surveyed, they surveyed 275 companies, the founders, the CEOs, the executives that make the decisions, and 42% said they have already moved or will be moving production south in the next 2 years. Beyond that, 57% said that due to the uncertainty, they're canceling or pausing their capital expenditures. So that's the investment in the future of their business, buying the new machinery, buying the new technology that allows them to be more productive, allows them to be more competitive. These are bad signals for the Canadian economy. And if Mark Carney had actually gotten a deal, if he hadn't, remember, he told us, I know Donald Trump. I dealt with him in my previous job. I know the president and I know how to negotiate. He clearly didn't. And you also see that with the Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, Michigan. Sure, it's finally going to reopen, but only after we agreed to pay them money that the Americans have no right to, according to the original agreement. Mark Carney is showing himself to be the opposite of a good negotiator. He is apparently an awful negotiator.
Yeah, speaking of Carney, guess what he was given recently? He was given a gift, which was a gun, while he was at the NATO summit in Turkey. So they gift him this gun, but it looks like he cannot use it. So what will happen to it?
Yeah, Mark Carney doesn't have a gun license at all. And I base that on his words. So for him to keep that personally, and it was a personal gift, I can't pronounce the name of the manufacturer, so please forgive me, but Turkish firearms are among the best in the world. They have a great reputation. And so this is a 357 Magnum revolver, looks like the kind of six-shooter you'd see in the old West movies. And, President Erdogan was very proud to be giving out this fine piece of Turkish equipment to all the NATO leaders. But as I said, Mark Carney doesn't have a gun license. Beyond that, he doesn't have a restricted gun license, which is what you need for a handgun. And this gun is actually illegal in Canada. But he doesn't want to hand the gift back. By the way, also illegal in Britain, so Keir Starmer couldn't take it. The prime minister said, well, we'll put it in a museum, a military museum. I mean, it was a NATO summit or some other type of museum, but apparently it's going to have to be reviewed. It's going to have to be made inert before they can do it. So, a funny little story on what is normally just an odd pleasantry between leaders is the prime minister said, my gift of maple syrup appears to pale in comparison.
No kidding. Well, at least he can use the maple syrup, though.
Yes.
He can eat it.
I'd like to use that gun. I fired ones just like it, and that one looks quite sweet.
Yeah, I was going to say it would probably be beautiful in a display somewhere, but if they have to review it and everything, that's a lot of red tape for sure. Okay, well, it looks like elbows may be coming down as Canadians are traveling more to the United States. It looks like that is ticking back up. So obviously these companies that want to pack up and go to the US, they're not the only ones. Canadian tourism in the United States is up.
Yeah, so let me just put on my glasses so I can read off the numbers. In 2024, car trips to the United States amounted to 1.98 million, and air trips were 467,000. That dropped dramatically to 1.3 million trips by car. So we dropped about just about 65,000 odd car trips in a year, and the airline trips went from 467,000 down to 363. So it's not like everybody stopped going, but that's a significant drop. Well, it's ticking back up for the third quarter in a row. And in 2026 so far, 1.4 million car trips. And, this is just for the month of June, by the way, 1.4 million car trips and 350,000 air trips. So people are starting to go back to the States, and whether it's for business, whether it is for pleasure.
Do you think FIFA might have had something to do with it as well?
Well, especially in the month of June, for sure. I know many people who haven't been traveling to the United States, but are like, oh, my team's playing in Boston. My team's playing in Dallas. I know several people that went down for different matches. And but I think, I've also had people tell me that they're going to the U.S. and they're apologizing for going to a place that their family has gone to for decades, but they've avoided the past couple of years. You know me, Jeanette, I have not stopped going to the United States. I travel a lot, but mostly within Canada. And it was just in Ottawa over the weekend, travel out west, travel down east. But I haven't stopped going to the United States. Neither have most Canadians, by the way.
Nor have I, Brian. Nor have I. Unfortunately, we're out of time here. I can't get to all of our questions, but political commentator for the Toronto Sun, Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.